It was an ordinary day in the town, with people crowding the marketplace, merchants shouting out their wares, and children weaving through the streets. Yet, at the edges of this vibrant scene stood a man apart from it all. He was cloaked in shame and misery, his face hidden under a ragged covering, his hands wrapped to conceal the marks of his affliction. This man was a leper, bearing a condition that not only ravaged his body but condemned his soul to a life of isolation. His existence was one of perpetual rejection. Families avoided him. Friends turned their backs. Even strangers crossed the road to avoid his shadow. To the world, he was untouchable, unworthy, and invisible. But today was different. Rumors buzzed through the streets. Jesus is here. The man had heard of Jesus, the teacher, the healer, the miracle worker. He had heard stories of blind eyes opened, broken bodies restored, and demons cast out. A flicker of hope ignited in his heart. Could this Jesus help him? The leper hesitated, knowing the risk. He wasn't allowed near the crowds, let alone a revered figure like Jesus. Yet, desperation drove him forward. Keeping his head low, he shuffled through the outskirts of the gathering, the whispers and gasps of disgust from passers-by stabbing at his resolve. When he finally saw Jesus, the man's heart leapt. He was surrounded by a crowd, but his presence was magnetic, his voice commanding yet gentle. The leper's hope gave way to boldness, and he fell to his knees right in front of Jesus, the crowd parting in shock and horror. "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean," the man pleaded, his voice trembling, a mixture of faith and desperation. The crowd froze, watching with bated breath. The man's words were audacious, his very presence scandalous. Surely, Jesus would rebuke him or step back. But what happened next left them stunned. Jesus didn't recoil. He didn't hesitate. Instead, he stepped closer to the man, his eyes filled with compassion. He reached out his hand, a hand that had healed the blind, multiplied bread, and calmed storms, and touched the man. It was an act of unimaginable love. For years, no one had dared to touch this man. He had been treated as less than human, a carrier of disease, a living warning sign. Yet, in this moment, Jesus broke every barrier, defied every expectation, and touched the untouchable. "I am willing," Jesus said, his voice steady and filled with authority. "Be clean." Immediately, the leper felt a rush of warmth and power through his body. He looked down and saw the sores vanish, the discoloration fade, the pain dissipate. His skin was smooth and whole, restored as if the disease had never been there. The man gasped, his hands trembling as he touched his face, his arms, his legs. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he looked up at Jesus, his healer, his savior. The crowd erupted in murmurs of awe and disbelief. Whispers of, "It's a miracle," and, "Who is this man?" rippled through the onlookers. But Jesus, calm and deliberate, addressed the man. "See that you don't tell anyone. But go, show yourself to the priest and offer the sacrifices that Moses commanded for your cleansing, as a testimony to them." Jesus' instructions were steeped in wisdom and compassion. The man's healing needed to be validated by the priests so he could re-enter society fully. The sacrifices were an acknowledgement of God's power and an act of worship for the restoration. The man nodded, his heart overwhelmed with gratitude. He rose, his steps now filled with strength and purpose, and walked toward the temple. Yet, the joy within him was too much to contain. Despite Jesus' request for silence, the man couldn't help but share what had happened. He became a living testimony, his voice proclaiming to all who would listen, "Jesus made me clean." As news of the miracle spread, so did the hope that Jesus offered. People marveled at his power, his love, and his willingness to cross every boundary to bring healing and restoration. The healing of the leper wasn't just about physical transformation. It was about breaking barriers, restoring dignity, and showing that no one, no matter how broken, rejected, or untouchable, is beyond the reach of God's love.